So the topic is meat rabbits versus chickens. Which is better? Which should you grow? Or should you only grow one or the other? Well, obviously a lot of that is a personal choice, but I'm going to share with you a little bit about our journey and our decisions, how we came to them. A lot of this is mostly based on personal experience, but also other known factors that are just true relative to chickens and rabbits. So before we jump into it, I'm here with Dan. He is one of my Californian bucks. He's going on about 7 months old now. He is one that I've held over and brought in to from a breeding pair that I had, from a litter that I saved to mix in some new genetics, get a little new blood and new life. He is named after a young friend of mine who is actually completing his technical training in the U.S. Army. So go Dan, good job, shout out to you. We definitely support our veterans and our armed services and all the other people who serve us publicly. So on to the topic of, what's better to raise, meat chickens or meat rabbits. Well, I have to say this. I'll preface by saying that we've raised all sorts of meat animals, definitely not every type there is, but I did grow up on a dairy farm where we raised a lot of our own food, and my husband and I over the last 27 years have raised a variety of animals for the home. A lot of larger, more mainstream meats, including pork and beef, and a lot of chickens. I myself raised the chickens, most of the chickens myself, and then processing was everybody, all hands on deck. Over the course of the years, it's been hundreds, if not 1,000 or more meat chickens that have been raised for us here. Once we started getting into rabbits about 3 years ago, I had intended on continuing to raise meat chickens, and it quickly became the case where we were like, whoa, what are we doing bothering with chickens? Especially once we started eating the rabbit meat. It's delicious. It's I explain it to people as a more flavorful chicken almost. It's slightly different in texture, but not very noticeably so. And it has a deeper flavor, but it is very similar to chicken. So it can be used in any recipe in any way that you would use chicken, basically. The only real difference is that, depending on what you like to use for cuts. Do you like your big chicken breasts? Well, you don't get a big chicken breast off a rabbit, but you do get some nice big thighs. You get some other meat, through the saddle as a ground, or like a stew meat or a chunked meat or strips or something like that. I throw it into all sorts of things, and it really shines. It's really good at absorbing flavors. But that is more of a conversation we can have on a different day. Right now, let's chat about some of the reasons that I think that meat rabbits are better. Number one on my list is that they're more self-sustaining than chickens. I'm not saying you can't keep backyard chickens that will reproduce on their own. In other words, lay eggs, incubate the eggs, hatch young, grow young. It can happen, but it can't happen with the meat that most people think of as comparable as with the birds that most people would think of as comparable in growing time to rabbits. So in other words, this Cornish cross birds, hybrid birds, they have a fast growth rate, anywhere, depending on what you're doing, between 6 and 12 weeks. And sure, you can harvest meat very quickly and quite a bit of it. But the animal that can do that cannot breed itself. Where these rabbits, Dan here, I'm putting him into service now, and he will be breeding my rabbits here, producing offspring in, 50 to 100 young a year, just by keeping him and, say, 2 other does. One other doe even, 4 to 5 litters a year off one doe, and say she has 8 to 10 per litter. Like, that is the norm. That is not like I'm pushing or doing anything unreasonable. In fact, you could push a doe a lot harder than that, and some people do, and it's still well within their natural abilities to do so. So that's important to me. I can keep these animals and they breed themselves and they reproduce themselves, and just 2 or 3 of them will provide hundreds of pounds of meat. Whereas with the chickens, I have to order in new chicks every time I want to grow a set. So now we get into the animals have to be shipped. They've got to be fed grain from day one. The rabbits, they spend the first 3 weeks of their life pretty much not eating any feed that I provide them at all, just nursing off the mother. And then they start nibbling from there, increase their feed supply until harvest date, which is, a lot of people are doing fryers. Most people probably are doing fryers at 10 to 12 weeks. I keep mine to 16 just because I've always been a person that says, hey, for 4 more weeks of growth, and I still get a half a pound of growth a week off those animals. I'd rather just have something bigger. We're a fairly large family. I like when I cook a rabbit, when I cook one animal, I know that it's going to feed the house. Now, sure, it would be just as easy for me to cook 2, but in my mind, I think I probably get a little bit more efficient, better use by using 1. But really, it's just a matter of management, what I choose to do. Whatever you choose to do is perfectly fine. Rabbits are good converters of feed. If you look this up online, it's a little hard to find some one solid answer. You'll see the conversion rate for rabbits listed anywhere from probably a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 pounds of feed to make 1 pound of meat, to a 5-to-1 ratio. But I also would note that the 5-to-1 ratio probably applies more to people who are feeding more foraged feed, maybe grow out tractors, more hay, different grains, different percentages of grains. I'm not saying any of that is bad. As a matter of fact, I think that you should consider the fact that even at a 5-to-1 feed conversion, if that feed input is something as simple as grass and weeds or something you're growing in your garden, then does it matter that much? I mean, that's cheap. You're just not going to make cheaper food than that. Even ranging chickens are not going to make cheaper food than that because they're not going to range 100%. Where if you wanted to, a rabbit could range or forage 100% on something that is growing in your yard. So, great converters of feed, fast growth. You can raise them without buying any commercial feeds at all. Chickens, I suppose you could, but it would be a difficult thing to do, and I think your inputs would be a lot harder to get them growing efficiently at that. I also prefer rabbits because I'll tell you, I never enjoyed growing what I called frankenbirds, the Cornish cross birds, and like I said, I grew hundreds of them. They don't act like normal animals. They don't range, they don't forage. I would literally go into a coop with 100 chickens and I had them sitting on shovels because they wouldn't move out of the way of the shovel. I'd have to physically throw everyone out the door, even though we provided them with good outside ranges. I know there's going to be people out there that say they have better luck with them ranging or being a little more normal. That's great for you. Something else is that rabbits don't have the death rate that the hybrid birds do. You really should, in my opinion, accommodate for probably like a 20%, maybe even 25, maybe down 10, 15, depends on your year and your set of chickens. But I would accommodate for that level of loss. And the reason being that those birds, they're just not designed to live. They have heart attacks. They lose their legs and can no longer support themselves, get to feed. They're not a clean animal. Rabbits, I'm not saying you'll never have a rabbit loss. It generally occurs when they're young as kits. Once you've got them growing, if you've got good clean conditions, you're not bound to lose very many grow outs beyond the stage of nesting kits. And really those losses occur generally within the first days, and it usually means there was something wrong with the kit. It's part of life, it's part of farming. It's unfortunate, it's not fun, but it happens. But the bottom line is that you don't have a lot of input into that. a lot of times, there's a couple of times when you lose meat birds, and you will lose some as young chicks, and then you will start to lose them again as older, almost harvest ready birds. And that's the worst time to lose them, because you have so much into them, so much money, so much feed into them at that point. It's a tough loss to take. One of my other big pros for raising rabbits is that not only do they breed and rear their own young, but they do it without any input from you. No utilities, no electricity. You're not running heat lamps, which are a danger to your structure, for one, but that's an expense. I mean, we all know electricity is not getting cheaper. It's only going up and up and up. So the less I can rely on electricity, and depending on how you feel about how comfortable you are with the state of the world and the state of the grid and all of that, if you're looking for something that, if we do get into a scenario where I'll go ahead and say the shit hits the fan scenario, I don't live a lot along those, but it's always in the back of my mind, and it is good for me to know that I have an animal in the rabbits that is able to live naturally off natural feeds and doesn't need the assistance of electricity. Which also we should talk about, access to the animals, because they're raising their own young, and because once you've got a set, you've got meat for years, barring unforeseen circumstances, but also keeping in mind you can always be holding back a grow out or two just in case something does happen to a breeder. Very easy to keep them in circulation and keep them going. Where chicks, if you're at least talking about the meat birds, the hybrids today, you have to order new ones, you have to buy them all the time. It's an expense. There's a lot of transport and fuel that goes along with that. So if we're kind of wrapping in eco-friendly choices, rabbits have it over chickens there too. Now, the other reason that we really, this might have been the biggest bottom line to us, although I really do love the rabbits and the management. I just enjoy them. Those are all factors too. I don't enjoy chickens like them. They're chickens. We've had some friendly chickens, but they're not a friendly animal. But the biggest reason is the processing. So the processing with chickens, like I said, it's all hands on deck when we were processing chickens, and we were raising in large amounts of, say, 50 to 100 when we raised a set. And or if you're not, to get this volume of meat, you're going to have to be raising many times a year and processing many times a year. And processing for chickens, I mean, God love you if you're hand plucking. That was not going to be an option for us. I would skin every one of them before I would hand pluck. But so that meant we had an investment in a plucker. It also meant that we had to have someone to run the plucker. We had to have somebody to run the scald water. We might be able to do it with 3 people, but that would be 3 of us working really hard. It was better if we had 4 or more. Because we also, you have to eviscerate, so we would have one person doing the killing in the cones and bleeding them out, while one person was dunking and scalding and then doing the plucking, and then I would be eviscerating, and before they finally got done. And so we had a decently efficient system there, but it is nothing like the efficiency of processing rabbits. I mean, we're still slow at it because we still consider ourselves learning, but 10 minutes a rabbit, 15 tops for one of us who's really slow if my husband is teaching someone new. But really, we can do 20 rabbits in an hour and a half or so. It's done. And the thing is, the setup and cleanup, it literally just requires some we use baling twine to hang them while we skin them. It requires a couple of good knives. That's just about it. Sure, we have a table on hand, things like that, some containers to put things in, but no big investment in equipment, no big time investment, easy to do. It is. Once my husband did rabbits once, and he was, the plucker, and the scalder, and he was like, okay, forget the chickens, we're just gonna do rabbits now. You know, and then you get into some of the more fun things that to say put rabbits over the top of chickens a little bit, and that would be that, like I said before, they're friendly, they're enjoyable animals. Kids enjoy having them. You know, kids, I've always found kids, if you're open and honest and clear with them from the beginning in terms of raising meat and animals, they take it very well. They deal with it very well, better than most adults, in my opinion. And but the key being that, you know, I've always pointed out to them the animals that are here to stay, at least for a while. So say a milk cow versus a beef cow, it would be clear that the beef was there for food and was going to be gone in a couple of years, where the milk cow hopefully would live with us for several years, you know, 5 years or so, maybe longer. She was okay to kind of make a pet and a bit of a member of the family. And it goes the same with the rabbits. The breeders, I expect my breeders to be around for a minimum of 2 to 3 years. I should say probably a minimum of 3 years, even longer. And we name them. We, you know, this is Dan, meet Dan. We name them. We let them be pets. You know, the kids can count on coming back and seeing those animals again. And then we point out the ones that, okay, but you know, the grow outs are grow outs. They will be processed. They will only be here for a couple of months. We give them a cage number that identifies which cage they're in if I want to take weights and things like that. But other than that, we don't name them. We don't make pets of them. Not to say we don't let them enjoy the little furry babies, but you know, as with everything, everything's cute when they're little, and they're not as cute when they're bigger. I mean, rabbits stay on the cuter side as compared to chickens and a lot of other things. But just to say that kids do really well with that, as long as you make it clear and you're honest and open with them from the beginning. Now, also, I would talk about, in my personal opinion, I think you have more of a market for supplemental sales with rabbits. And those could be, say, pets, a lot of raw animal prey diet feeders. I've had tons of interest from them. You know, more that you could do there. Not to say there isn't a supplemental market with chickens, but in my experience, there's probably more opportunities with the rabbits, being other meat rabbit growers who are looking for breeding stock, pets, what have you. So that's it. That's you know, that's my big spiel on why I think that meat rabbits are a better choice than chickens, and you know why we prefer them. And you know, we go into a little more detail in the article that we have on the website about this. The website is meatrabbits.org. We'd love to have you over there. Check it out. If you have anything to offer, go ahead and leave it in the comments and have a conversation.